There is something on your phone right now that you don't need to see. You know that, and you're going to check anyway. Not because you're weak, not because you lack discipline, because a small group of engineers spent years making sure that's exactly what happens. This is the story of how your attention was turned into a product, and why the part of your brain that's supposed to protect you is the exact reason you can't escape. In the early days of the internet, apps competed for usefulness. The goal was simple: help the user do something, then let them leave. Build a better tool, earn loyalty, repeat. That model worked, but it didn't scale fast enough. So around 2009, something quietly shifted inside the biggest tech companies in the world. The new metric wasn't satisfaction, it wasn't even happiness. It was time on screen. And the race to maximize it changed everything. To understand what they built, you need to go back to 1953. A psychologist named B.F. Skinner placed a rat inside a specially designed box. The box had one feature, a lever. When the rat pressed it, a food pellet dropped. Every single time. Press pellet, press pellet. The rat learned the pattern quickly. It pressed when hungry, ate, and moved on. Predictable, controlled, almost boring. Then Skinner changed one variable and accidentally discovered the engine behind modern addiction. He made the reward random. Sometimes the lever gave food. Sometimes it gave nothing at all. The rat had no way of knowing which outcome was coming. What happened next stunned researchers. The rat stopped being able to stop. It pressed the lever obsessively, compulsively, long past hunger, long past need. Not because the food was better, because the uncertainty was unbearable. Psychologists call this a variable reward schedule, and in the decades since Skinner's experiment, it has shown up in casinos, in loot boxes, in trading apps, and in every feed you've ever scrolled. The slot machine is the clearest real-world example. A person sits at a machine knowing the odds are against them. They've lost 20 times in a row. They know the next pull probably won't pay out either. And they pull again. Not out of optimism, out of an inability to walk away from an unresolved loop. Nevada casinos figured this out in the 1970s. They removed clocks and windows from casino floors, not to deceive people about time, to remove the environmental cues that would trigger the decision to leave. The tech industry studied this, and then built the same principles into something you carry in your pocket. But variable rewards only explain why you can't stop once you've started. They don't explain the urge to check in the first place. For that, the engineers needed something much older. Something your ancestors developed when the world was genuinely trying to kill them. Your brain evolved over hundreds of thousands of years in environments where missing information could be fatal. A sound in the dark, a shift in the group's behavior, a face that looked different than yesterday. Ignoring those signals wasn't a personality flaw. It was a death sentence. So your brain developed a hair-trigger response to anything unresolved. An unanswered question. An incomplete pattern. A threat that hasn't been identified yet. These things don't just make you curious, they make you physiologically uncomfortable until they're resolved. In 1994, a psychologist named George Lowenstein published a paper that gave this phenomenon a name. He called it the information gap theory of curiosity. His finding was simple and brutal. Curiosity is not a pleasant state. It is a gap between what you know and what you want to know. And that gap feels like a mild but persistent form of pain. You don't scroll because it feels good. You scroll to make the discomfort stop. And every notification, every badge, every unread count is a carefully engineered information gap placed directly on top of your threat detection system. This is where a second experiment becomes important. In the 1970s, psychologist Zeigarnik, building on earlier work by her mentor Kurt Lewin, documented what is now called the Zeigarnik Effect. The finding: humans remember uncompleted tasks far better than completed ones. In her experiments, participants who were interrupted mid-task could recall nearly twice as many details about that task compared to tasks they had finished. The brain, it turns out, keeps an open file on everything unresolved. It allocates mental resources to unfinished loops, keeping them active, returning to them, refusing to archive them until they're closed. Now look at your phone again. Every unread message is an open file. Every unanswered notification is an interrupted task. Every unseen update is a Zeigarnik loop that your brain is quietly dedicating background processing power to, whether you asked it to or not. The badge on your app icon is not a number. It is a count of how many open loops are currently running inside your nervous system. There's a third layer, and this one is the most uncomfortable. In the 1950s, psychologist Solomon Asch ran a series of experiments on social conformity. He showed participants a simple image, 1 line on the left, 3 lines on the right. The task was to say which of the 3 lines on the right matched the one on the left. The answer was completely obvious. But the other people in the room, who were secretly working with Asch, all gave the wrong answer first. And then something remarkable happened. 37% of participants gave the same wrong answer as the group, not because they couldn't see, but because disagreeing with the group triggered a response in the brain that felt like a social threat. Brain scans from later replications showed that conforming to the group activated the brain's reward centers, and going against the group activated the same regions associated with physical pain. Your social feeds are Asch experiments running on you continuously. When you see that a post has 10,000 likes, your brain doesn't evaluate the content independently. It registers social proof. It feels the pull toward agreement. When you see that everyone in your circle is talking about something, ignoring it doesn't feel like a choice. It feels like exclusion. And exclusion, to your ancient brain, registers as danger. So here is what is actually happening every time you pick up your phone. A variable reward loop is pulling you into compulsive repetition. An information gap is generating low-level pain until you resolve it. A Zeigarnik loop is running in the background, keeping every open thread alive. And a social threat detection system is making you feel that staying uninformed means falling behind the group. These are not personality weaknesses. They are 4 separate psychological mechanisms, each one refined over decades of behavioral research, all firing at the same time, aimed directly at you. Here is where most conversations about this topic stop. They tell you what's happening, and then they say, put the phone down, take a break, be more mindful. And that advice isn't wrong. It's just incomplete. Because every one of those mechanisms operates below the level of conscious decision-making. By the time your prefrontal cortex has formed the thought, I should probably stop, the check has already happened. The hand moved before the decision was made. Willpower is a post hoc story your brain tells about a behavior that was already complete. So what actually works? The research here is more consistent than most people realize. The first and most evidence-backed intervention is environmental restructuring. A 2019 study published in the Journal of Experimental Psychology found that simply having a smartphone visible on a desk, even face down, even switched off, measurably reduced available cognitive capacity. The phone doesn't need to be on. Its physical presence is enough to partially activate the loops it's associated with. The structural solution isn't discipline, it's distance. Phone in a different room. Notifications off entirely. Not reduced, off. The second intervention targets the Zeigarnik loops directly. Research by psychologist E.J. Masichampo found that you don't need to complete an open task to close the mental file on it. You just need to make a specific plan for when you'll deal with it. Writing down, I will check messages at 6 p.m. deactivates the background processing your brain was running on that open loop. The brain accepts the plan as a form of closure. This is why people who schedule their phone time, not limit it, but schedule it, report significantly less compulsive checking than those who try to resist in the moment. The third intervention targets the variable reward loop at its source. The unpredictability is what makes the loop compulsive. So the intervention is to make the reward predictable again. Chronological feeds instead of algorithmic ones. Checking email at fixed intervals rather than in response to notifications. Reading news once at a set time rather than refreshing throughout the day. When you know what's coming and when it's coming, the lever loses its power. The rat in a predictable box presses the lever when it's hungry and stops when it isn't. The fourth intervention is the one nobody wants to hear. Audit what the phone is actually replacing. Most compulsive phone use doesn't happen in a vacuum. It fills specific gaps: boredom, social discomfort, the transition between tasks, the avoidance of something harder. Research consistently shows that identifying the emotional function the phone is serving, and then deliberately providing an alternative for that function, produces more durable behavior change than any restriction-based approach. The phone isn't the problem. The phone is the solution to a problem you haven't named yet. Your brain isn't broken, it isn't weak, it isn't failing you. It is working exactly as it was designed to work, by evolution and then redesigned by people whose financial interests depend on keeping it in a loop. Understanding the mechanism doesn't automatically free you from it, but it does change the question. The question was never, why can't I stop? The question is, what has been deliberately built to make sure I don't? If this video shifted something for you, subscribe to The Drift. Every week, one behavior, one hidden mechanism, one thing you won't be able to unsee.